But I think what a lot of residents and fellows do not understand are what are these common things that are going to cause a modification, a rating, or a decline. And once we understand that, you will quickly realize how important what we are talking about is and why you really need to, first things first, be sure if there is a GSI program available at your institution.
Welcome to Finance for Physicians, the show where we help physicians like you use money as a tool to live a great life. I'm your host, Daniel Wren, and I've spent the last decade advising physicians on their personal finances, with the mission to help them understand that taking control of their finances now means creating a future where they can practice medicine where, when, and how long they want to. Larry, what's going on, man? It's been a long time.
It's been too long. I think I was one of your early guests on the podcast.
You were. I think you might have been like 1, 2, or 3. I can't remember, but we're back. So we're back with lots of updates. There's a lot of we were catching up before we hit record, but there's a lot of stuff brewing in the world of disability insurance, in particular for physicians, and it's I think a lot of it I wasn't even aware of, and I'm sure a lot of you guys listening are not aware. Excuse me, not aware of these big potential, we'll call them landmines, I guess, that are brewing in the disability world. And so that's what we're going to get into today is some of these important need to knows in regards to disability insurance, in particular for physicians. So Larry, I'm sure a lot of you guys listening know Larry. But for those that don't, he is the man when it comes to physician disability insurance. He's how many year veteran?
34 years.
34 years. All right.
Yep. 34 years as of August. So
nice.
Thank God. You know what they say, right? In the insurance world, unlike medical school, if you took your, average class size of 100, we know probably 95% of them are going to graduate and, get their MD or DO, and they're going to go on to practice or go into the private sector. In the insurance world or financial planning world, believe it or not, in that same 100, within the same 4 years as medical school, the dropout rate is 89%.
Yeah.
So 11 will remain standing, so very, very interesting, unlike when you're growing up, and most of you that are listening to this probably remember having a white coat on or a plastic stethoscope around your neck, and you had this epiphany of, I want to be a healer or a physician or a surgeon, and this is what I need to do to make it happen. Unfortunately, that really doesn't happen, in our industry. Most of the time, it's either by accident, which was my story, or someone brings you in and they mentor you and they help you grow. And that's basically how you get into the insurance or financial planning industry.
Yeah. And he's worked with about a zillion physicians. I'm sure it's thousands, right? Physicians.
Yeah. It's thousands across the country, all walks, med students, residents, fellows, practicing, those that are retiring, those that have left the clinical practice to go work as medical directors or big pharma. So I can't say I've seen it all, but I will say I've probably seen most.
Yeah. And he knows a lot of the intricacies within. I don't know if anybody's listening has read through a disability insurance policy. If you have, kind of what I'm talking about. You probably fell asleep while you're reading it, but there's a ton of legalese within those contracts, and there's a lot of stuff. You got to read it like 15 times to kind of get it. But Larry knows that by heart. So
yeah, I try to live in the minutia, like when you're first coming into the industry, it's really all about, they tell us like sell the need, why someone should have disability insurance. And I was like that for the early part, of my career, the first couple of years. And then I said, you know what, I don't want to be the guy that sells the need. That's for, a younger, newer agent. I want to be the person that helps the physician that knows that they need it, find as close to the ideal solution based on their individual needs, goals, budget, and philosophy. So I live in the weeds, you might say.
Yep, yep, nice. Well, yeah, so we were getting into it a little bit before we, like I said, before we started hitting record, but maybe we could back up a little bit and start with some of this stuff. We were getting into what's called guaranteed issue disability insurance. So maybe, Larry, for starters, you could explain what guaranteed issue is versus like, the individual policy versus group policies.
Yeah. So what we'll find is if we look at guaranteed standard issue, or we love acronyms in insurance, it's just not only for you guys in medicine and the military and the VA hospital. Just stands for guaranteed standard issue, or GSI. And the first thing to know is that this is the same individual disability insurance policy that you would go out and buy in the open market. The big difference is generally there is either no medical underwriting, or there's going to be what's known as gatekeeper questions, or a couple of knockout questions. Other than that, if you're looking at what's called a fully underwritten policy, this is where you're going to answer medical questions. The insurance company behind the scenes is going to do a prescription drug check. They can go ahead and they can request a copy of your medical records. There's a HIPAA compliant medical authorization, in the application. And based on what the underwriter, the person reviewing you as a risk, sees, whether it is medical, whether it's financial, whether it's hazardous activities that you might participate in, they can come back and either decline you and say, we're sorry, based on what we're seeing here, we're unable to offer coverage for any number of reasons. They can come back and say, well, Daniel, we can offer coverage to you, but we're going to have to modify your policy, and we're going to exclude or not pay benefits for either specific body parts
Mhm.
or specific medical conditions that you might have. And these exclusion riders are written in a very broad manner, so much to the point that you might say, wow, this is really broad. Like, I went scuba diving and I got some foreign matter in my right ring finger, and I'm a surgeon, and they want to exclude my right hand. Well, we're always going to look for, a causal or a contributory relationship. So let's say you did have an exclusion rider on your policy. We're going to say, did having that foreign matter in your hand as a result of your scuba diving, did that cause or contribute to your disability? And if the answer is, well, yes, it did, that exclusion rider is going to be upheld and that claim would not be paid. If it did
Mhm.
not, I was in a car accident, I was rear-ended and my, ligaments were shattered and I could no longer work as, say, a general surgeon. Well, having that foreign matter in your right ring finger is not going to have caused or contributed to that disability, and that claim would actually be paid.
Mhm. So
So,
individual is like going to have these exclusion riders, modifications, and it's not going to be guaranteed standard issue is going to be boilerplate, like boilerplate as in it's got the same sort of chassis as an individual policy, but it's just going to be like approve or not approve. And then
yes.
the individual policies are going to be like approve, modified with like your example of the hand exclusion or declined, right?
Yes. And what you'll find is a lot of people think a GSI plan or a GSI program, is its own type of insurance. And it's not. It's the same individual policy that you would purchase. It just removes the medical underwriting component of the process.
Is there any other differences between guaranteed standard issue and individual policies?
For the most part, the only real differences are depending upon the insurance company. And the big players currently in the individual GSI marketplace are Berkshire, which is a Guardian company. You can use those interchangeably. Standard Insurance Company, Emeritus, to a much larger extent, Mass Mutual used to be much larger. Now they're down to a handful of
Mm,
hospitals. And what they'll do is they will structure the GSI plan and how it looks. So there are going to be some parameters that are really pre-done. And that's usually going to have a 24-month limitation for claims resulting from mental or nervous conditions. So when
Yeah.
I say mental nervous conditions, I think, at least I like to think the way I probably should as an insurance agent, right? Anxiety, depression, stress, chemical dependency, drug addiction,
Mhm.
burnout, anything in the
And
DSM.
that's a pretty standard thing on a lot of policy, like individual or guaranteed and standard issue. There's a pretty fair amount of policies, maybe probably the majority, I don't know for sure, but the majority I see have 24-month exclusion for
Yes,
mental
and
nervous.
it's usually going to be either 24 months over your lifetime, or it's going to be 24 months per episode of disability, and that can vary by company or that can vary by state of
Mhm.
residence. Most companies, depending upon your state of residence or your medical specialty, they might even make available to you outside of a GSI plan a choice. Well, Daniel, built into the policy is a 24-month limitation. If you'd like to remove the limitation, you can
But
basically forfeit the discount and you can
yeah.
have unlimited coverage. Or we might say it comes unlimited,
Hmm.
not a GSI plan. And if you'd like to add a limitation for a discount, we can do that as well. But the GSI plans really do include that 24-month limitation as part of the structure or
Hmm.
the plan parameters.
Are there
Uh,
discounts sometimes on the guaranteed standard issue?
there's always discounts, and you're going to find
So
either
that's
a
just kind of a dependent upon, like maybe your individual policy could have discounts as well, and the guaranteed standard issue could.
yeah, well, remember, this is still the same individual policy. So you're going to
Yeah, yeah.
find like
So the
on
discounts are
Guardian,
not affected by the guaranteed standard issue, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
not at all. Not at all.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes
It-
sense.
the other thing that you'll find is the benefit amount is going to be limited. And
Okay.
plans are now getting, more aligned with each other. But, some of them, like an emeritus GSI plan, I saw them with an all-in maximum monthly benefit of $6,000 all the way up to 15,000. Uh, Guardian's GSI plans go to 15,000. Um, you'll find Standards GSI plans go to 15,000. Mass Mutual is generally a lower amount. The ones that I'm aware of are
Mm.
7,500. But just know it's not the same as a fully underwritten plan where
Yeah.
it'll go up to 20 or 30,000. Now,
Mm.
you can actually combine, assuming you're eligible and you qualify, and let's say
Yeah.
the reason you're buying the GSI plan is either simplicity, it's a fast track to get insurance, or you're going to get an exclusion rider. Let's say you're an orthopedic surgeon, you had surgery on your right shoulder, and there's some hardware in there, and that's going to be a permanent exclusion as a
Mhm.
result of that surgery, and you don't really want to be limited to 15,000, you can
Yep.
buy two policies from the same company. One's a GSI with no exclusion rider, and then the other one would be fully underwritten with an
Mhm.
exclusion rider. Odds
Yeah.
are pretty good. You would want to maximize the increase option and get to that 15,000 without the exclusion rider first, and then you could circle back and increase your fully underwritten policy. So let's say that $30,000 a month is your maximum. And I will mention this, a lot of physicians are unaware that if you have no other coverage at all, in order to reach $30,000 a month, your net income, so if you're self-employed, it's after expenses before taxes. If you're an employee of an institution, it's going to be typically box 5 on your W-2 plus whatever moonlighting income you might have.
Which one
You
is
got to
box
be
five?
earning
Is that
about
federal wages?
yeah, you got to be earning about 1.25 million to get there.
So
So
to max out disability at 30,000 a month, you got to be earning 1.25 million a year.
yeah, and that assumes you've got no other coverage at all. So certain medical specialties, which are known to be on the low income side, sometimes they'll raise this concern to me, but Larry, this will only get me to $15,000 a month.
Yeah, I bet.
Uh, I was talking to this other agent, and he or she says, that 30,000 a month is the magic number. And I'm like, let me ask you before we get there, what do you think your maximum income potential is?
Yeah,
And it's not even remotely close
right.
to.
Does the guaranteed standard issue, they no longer have sex neutral rates, right?
Well, gender neutral rates are interesting. So emeritus in a handful of states still offers that.
And
The
that's
new
through the guaranteed
product,
standard issue.
yes, only for the
Okay.
guaranteed
So
standard.
that's important because that's a special type of, especially for females, like they basically make the rates the same for male and female. And so normally when you just buy it on the market individually, females rates are a lot higher than male. And so with this sex neutral or gender equal rates, it's
Mhm.
going to be considerably lower for females just as a result of buying it through guaranteed standard issue.
Yes. And what you'll find is in the emeritus world, it's a handful of states that are still using the old product.
Hmm.
For standard insurance company, there are three institutions where there still are unisex rates on their GSI offerings. All the other ones are now gender distinct. And then
Hmm.
all of the Guardian GSI plans are gender distinct. So you can make an argument if someone is really price conscious, especially your female physicians, if they're fortunate enough to find a unisex rate, they can literally save somewhere between 50 to 60%
Yeah.
off of the normal female rate. So you're 100% right there.
Right. Okay. So why is this a big deal? I think that would, if I'm listening, I'm thinking, well, what's the big deal? Because I was kind of teasing out like this is a big deal at the beginning. The reason this is a big deal, this whole guaranteed standard issue thing, is because a very large amount of people have modifications, like Larry explained the hand example. Like a pretty large amount of people we work with, we see a lot of disability policies as financial planners. There's a large amount of people that have those modifications where it's like your back's excluded or your hands excluded or whatever, and or even some of them are declined. And so
Mhm.
when you have that modification, or especially if you're declined, and you had access to guaranteed standard issue and you didn't know it, that's a major problem. Say you have a hand exclusion, you get disabled, they don't pay because it was related to the hand thing, and you all along had a guaranteed standard issue program in your hospital and you didn't even know it. That's like millions of dollars we're talking about there that could
Yes.
be in play. And no one wants an exclusion if they don't have to have one. It's never a good thing to have an exclusion if you can avoid it. And so guaranteed standard issue is a big deal because it can potentially allow you to avoid exclusion or even declines individually speaking. So it should be something you're always, I mean, especially before you get coverage and even after you get coverage, be something that's on the radar as far as like, oh, I wonder if I have a guaranteed standard issue available. But then the question is like, well, how do I know? I mean, well, first of all, did I break that down correctly, Larry? Or is there
Yeah.
anything?
So I would say the first thing, if you're looking for disability insurance or you're even remotely thinking about disability insurance, whether you know you have a medical history or you don't know you have a medical history, you really have to make sure that you remain eligible for a GSI program. So, general rule is if you apply for a medically underwritten or fully underwritten policy, like what Daniel and I described, you're answering medical questions,
Yeah, an
they're
individual
doing a
policy.
prescription drug check, they're getting your copy of your medical records. If you are declined, if you are offered a modified policy with an exclusion rider, a rating, which is a fancy terminology for an additional like substandard premium charge. In some cases, if you put an application in, and let's say I'm dealing with one of Daniel's clients and we're talking, and I said, Daniel, look, this person is going to get this, this, and this. I think I really should pull their application. Removing an application or withdrawing an application from the medical underwriting process can, in and of itself, make someone ineligible for a GSI plan. Now, there's a couple of very specific rules. So, current date, standard insurance company. If you're declined by another company, you are ineligible. But if you are offered a modified policy or a rating or some other modification, that is still in play. Emeritus, if you're declined, modified, rated, withdraw a pending application, even if you applied to emeritus, the GSI plan is no longer on the table. Guardian has some very unique rules. So number one is if you apply to Guardian on a medically underwritten basis, currently they will still accept you even if you were declined, offered a modified policy, withdrew a pending application. As long as you went there and you didn't go to a company besides Guardian, you are still eligible. So you can apply safely to Guardian on a medically underwritten basis, and the GSI is still available. So if you're not sure, you're like, I'm not sure what's in my
That's kind of
medical
confusing.
records.
That's a lot of moving
Yeah.
parts.
So the big moving part there is if you're looking for a Guardian GSI and you uncover that that is the one in your hospital, you can still apply to Guardian medically and know that the GSI is still there as an option as a
Mhm.
fallback.
Yeah.
Number
So,
two is kind of interesting, right? So number two is, you know, let's say you're listening to this in a couple of months and you're, an MS4, you're getting ready to match. You've been told that you need to buy disability insurance and you really want to do it as soon as possible. And let's just say you're in medical school ABC and you've matched and you're going to do your residency in hospital XYZ. And you apply medically to a company other than Guardian and you are declined for any number of reasons. Because that decline took place prior to your hire date at the institution in which the Guardian GSI plan lives, you are still eligible. You basically get a clean slate and a fresh start,
interesting. That's
right?
even more confusing.
Yes. And then the third one is probably the most confusing of them all. So let's say you finished medical school, you matched, you knew you were going to, hospital XYZ. You didn't apply for any insurance, and 2 months into your PGY 1 year, you apply for coverage. I'll just say you went to a company besides Guardian and you are declined or modified or rated, or you withdrew a pending application. Like your agent told you, Daniel, the Titanic is going to sink. We need to pull your application. If it happens to be you're in a hospital that has a Guardian GSI, and the knowing or you becoming aware of the modification, decline, withdrawing of the application, rating is within the first 9 months of your hire date at that institution. So let's say you started July 1st. If you became aware of this modification, decline, rating through the end of March, you are still eligible for the GSI plan with Guardian, not only through your entire residency, but up to 90 days after you graduate, if that's when your knowing of the modification took place. It doesn't mean you have to buy the GSI plan within 9 months. It
Mm.
just, you had to be aware of that modification, decline, withdrawal of the application within that time frame. So timing is very important.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our firm, Renda Financial Planning. The goal of our podcast is to empower you to make better financial decisions. But sometimes the best financial decision you can make is to work with someone who understands your financial goals and has the expertise to keep you on track to reach them. That's where Renda Financial Planning comes in. We are a full service financial planning firm that works with over 400 physicians and their families across the country. We charge a transparent monthly flat fee for our services and offer virtual meetings you can take from anywhere. Best of all, you'll get to work with a team that specializes in working with physician families. So whether you're starting out and wondering how you'll balance your student loan payments and saving for a home, or you are an established physician trying to figure out how to pay for your kids' college and how much you need to save to reach financial freedom, we can help. I'll put a link in the show notes to schedule a no obligation meeting with one of our certified financial planners. Wren Financial Planning, LLC is a registered investment advisor. For more information about our firm, please visit wrenfinancial.com. That's WRENNE financial.com. Yeah. Okay. Let me repeat this because I don't know if I got all this, but especially this last one, I definitely didn't get that. But
Gotcha.
let me see how close I am on all this. So standard, it sounds like any decline at another company or standard, you're off
Correct.
limits for GSI, right?
Yes. Yep. 100%
Okay.
accurate.
Emeritus, it's like any adverse, like modification, decline, at any other company or with Emeritus, you're off limits for GSI. They're the most strict on it.
Yeah, even if you pulled a pending application
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Emeritus or another
anything.
company, you're out.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then Guardian's got this. Well, if it's a Guardian policy, then they'll let you be eligible. So if you applied individually with Guardian, you would still be eligible for the guaranteed standard issue.
Correct?
If it's a other company and it's before you start, then you get a clean slate when you start
Yep. So
for guaranteed.
that could be you finished medical school and you didn't start residency. It could be you
Switching
finished
hospitals.
residency, got declined by another carrier. Now you're starting your fellowship in a different
What if you're
institution.
switching hospitals? Just you're in practice, you're switching hospitals.
It would not work if you're in
Okay.
practice. It's
All
got
right.
to be
So it's
no.
training to practice. Resets it. So when you go into practice, you get a reset or training to training and
Well, remember, training to practice, it would be only if you applied within 90 days after finishing your residency or fellowship and you still needed to qualify for the Guardian GSI. Once
so
you're in practice, yeah.
there's some details on that one. And then the third one, I don't even it may be lots of details. Talk to Larry. I don't know.
Yeah, third one is basically 9 months. If the bad outcome happens within the first 9 months of your hire date at the
Mhm.
institution in which the Guardian GSI plan lives, even if you subsequently apply in residency, the GSI is still an option. But
And
if you get stuck, just know the answers are there. You can email me or reach
right.
out to
And
Daniel. I'll give him the answers in more detail.
and that's what we just went through is a big deal because that kind of will screen or some people may not be eligible already, I guess. And
Yes.
there's a few different things to be thinking about as far as whether or not you could get some of this guaranteed standard issue stuff we're talking about. One of them is your history of applying for individual coverage, and that's just what we went through. So there could be these
Yes.
qualifiers that occurred in your past related to you trying to get individual coverage on your own through medical underwriting that cause you to be disqualified completely with certain companies, and they vary. Like we were just going through there, it gets a little confusing with Guardian, but we can kind of refer to Larry when when those questions come up. But then there's the other part of the equation. So you also have to be working for an institution that offers it or
Yes.
is eligible for it. Or how do I know? I mean, is that a black
Generally,
box?
agents that are well versed in the medical marketplace, we tend to know. So let's look at this, and it's
Can you
still the
send me a
same.
list?
Yeah, it's still the same plan.
Yeah.
So think about it this way. So I'm going to use two terms. I'm going to use an endorsed GSI program. So this is where the institution, an agent, and an insurance company kind of got together. The institution signs off on it. The institution says we're willing to promote this or at least make our residents aware of it.
Yeah.
If this is the situation you're in and you call GME, hey, I'm looking for a guaranteed standard issue plan. Can you tell me, does our hospital have it? They're going to know. The majority of plans are, I'm going to use the term non endorsed. So I have several of these. So this is where I go to the insurance company. Hey, Guardian. Hey, Emeritus. I do a lot of business at this hospital. I don't have any relationship with the GME department or the executives at the hospital, but you can see what my numbers look like and you could see how many clients I have there. Would you be willing to help me help you and allow me to have a GSI plan at that institution? And now it's the insurance company giving me the GSI plan. So even on all of my brochures that I send out for my programs, it says XYZ hospital does not endorse, XYZ hospital is not promoting. This insurance company is not an official vendor of XYZ
Yeah.
hospital. It's really Guardian's offer to the residents or fellows at that hospital. Now, what's most important, and this is what we should drive home, is we kind of outline the rules as to like how you could become ineligible. But I think what a lot of residents and fellows do not understand are what are these common things that are going to cause a modification, a rating, or a decline. And once we understand that, you will quickly realize how important what we are talking about is and why you really need to, first things first, be sure if there is a GSI program available at your institution. So, Daniel,
Mhm.
I got to imagine as a financial planner, you probably see some of this, but it's mainly interactions with insurance agents behind the scenes, or you reviewed a policy and you see
Yeah.
all sorts of exclusion riders. So, number one, these are not necessarily in any particular order, but you can kind of get an idea. So, number one is let's go with self prescribing or peer prescribing. So, you're writing scripts for yourself. I'm not talking about the really easy stuff like a Z-Pack because I've got something going on. I'm talking about you're self-prescribing an SSRI or anti-anxiety medication.
Mm.
Maybe you're married to another physician or another healthcare professional and they're prescribing for you. And you're going through medical underwriting and the underwriter comes back to me and they say, Larry, can you go ahead? We've done this prescription drug check. We see this person is taking this prescription. Can you go ask them what symptoms are being treated? What is the current status of the symptoms? And where can we get a copy of the medical records that go along with this prescription? And the answer is there
Oh,
are none. Well, generally, that's going to be an instant decline
yeah.
with any company. Uh, number two, you can see this is going to generally be an exclusion. Females, you're currently pregnant, or you have a history of pregnancy, complications, or you're going through infertility treatments. That's generally going to get you an exclusion rider for pregnancy or complications of pregnancy. Um, you've been diagnosed with, hard to believe, or being treated for stress, anxiety, or depression. Go
Sure.
find me a medical resident or fellow where
It's everyone.
no, they don't really have that. Or maybe they've been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD. They're taking Adderall or Vyvanse. That's going to get you a mental or nervous exclusion rider. Uh, here's an instant decline for you. Diabetes, right? Type 1 diabetes. Every company is just going to flat out say, we're not interested. So I had someone the other day that applied medically. In my intake form, they told me they were a type 1 diabetic and they were using insulin. And I said, why did you apply medically? Like you're an instant decline. No company will ever consider you. Oh, well, the insurance agent didn't ask me any medical questions.
Yeah.
I applied to the insurance company and then I found that out. Well, you need to do your due diligence. Uh, this will get you an exclusion rider. How about a recent needle stick where you did not have a negative HIV, hepatitis B, or hepatitis C test 6 months post exposure? So that's not a bad exclusion. I would say that that's kind of a temporary exclusion as long as you come up with the negative test 6 months post exposure. But a GSI plan, like a Guardian GSI plan, that would not have an exclusion rider. Uh, recent surgery, or like I mentioned before, surgery where hardware was placed. If there was hardware placed and it's still there, that's a permanent exclusion for that
Yeah.
specific joint or body part. You don't see this too much with younger people, but a history of cancer, that's generally going to be a decline for a period of time.
Mhm.
Being treated by a chiropractor. But Daniel, I go prophylactically. I just want to make sure, I'm a
Preventatively.
surgeon. I'm an interventional cardiologist. I wear a lead vest. That's going to basically get you some kind of an exclusion because your medical records are going to state that you have an issue, even though you might be doing it prophylactically.
So
Uh,
I know how do I know if I'm able to even I know the some people can go to their hospital and say, hey, do I have access to this guaranteed standard issue? But then the majority of them, it sounds like, are non institutionally endorsed options.
yeah,
And so you got to just talk to agents that know, right? I mean, that's
yeah. You can either talk to agents, you can literally just Google Guardian GSI plans they will typically come up, and the list can change because, one of the big things that the insurance companies are looking for, because people say, well, this sounds too good to be true.
I'm
Like, why
doing it
would the
right
insurance
now. I'm
companies
going to
like,
test them.
yeah, it should come up as number one.
Well, this is disabilityquotes.com, but there's a bunch of them on here. So like Mount Sinai, Mayo Clinic, LSU, Midwestern University, New York Presbyterian, Ohio Health, Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, Rowan University. Basically, almost all, or maybe all fellow resident programs are on a
I
GSI.
I wouldn't say all. I would say an
Almost.
overwhelming majority. You'd
Yeah.
be more likely to not find one than you would to actually
Yeah.
find one.
University of Kentucky, that's near me. Like, I'm looking for a non-residency fellowship program on this list, but
You won't find that. They're all GSIs for the most part are all geared towards residents and fellows. Now that
okay, so
does
there's
not
not gonna.
mean,
So if I'm working for a hospital that doesn't have a residency or fellowship program, it's unlikely that I would have a GSI available. Or
yeah. Now if you're working for a big hospital or you're working for a large private practice, they might have a GSI plan that dovetails as a supplement to the group insurance plan, but you won't find that online. That's going to be more you got to go to,
like a
human
Baptist,
resources.
like a Baptist Health kind of a thing,
Yes.
like that
Yeah.
would most likely have GSIs available.
More likely to have it, than a private practice that's very small. That's for sure. But it always makes sense. Ask the agents. I always tell people it's amazing how many people don't ask me. So, these days you go to the physician blogosphere, you listen to podcasts. I mean, everyone has been taught to go ahead and speak to several agents. And if
Mm.
it was me, there's a couple of questions that I might ask. Hey, how long have you been doing this? Right?
35 years.
Yeah, how long have you been doing this? What's your typical client? How many of my specialty do you work with in a given year? How many have you worked with in the past? But I think the big one would be, Daniel, I'm going to reach out to several agents, or I've been in the process of doing this. Let me ask you, do you know of or do you have access to a discount or a guaranteed standard issue plan that others might not? And right away, you can start to whittle down because all of these plans, and this kind of runs right into a massive conflict of interest. All of these plans have either an endorsed agent or a group of endorsed agents. And these are the people that actually have the ability to sell the guaranteed standard
Mm.
issue plan to you. So I'll speak for myself. If you come to me and you say, I'm a physician, I'm a resident at such and such hospital, and I see, or I want to make you aware of a GSI plan, just so you know it's an option. I will say, just to let you know, there is a GSI plan at your hospital with Standard, with Emeritus, with Guardian, with Mass Mutual. I am not the endorsed agent. In your case, I cannot do it for you. But let me give you the name and contact information of the agent that can. Now you can go ahead and you can do your due diligence. Now, most of the time, I have the software and I can run these quotes anyway. I can go through them with clients. I can tell them, the positive about it. I can tell them how it might compare to something else.
Mm.
Even if I'm not the person that can actually be their agent initially, I can have that policy sold to them by the endorsed agent. And then I can come back and I can become their agent of record and service that going forward. In real simple language, in these situations, I don't have the keys to the castle, but once you're in, I can show you around, right? A couple of other big things, and these are kind of new. If you've been diagnosed with psoriasis or psoriatic arthritis, you really need to investigate a GSI. If you are beyond the skin and it's going to your joints, or you're taking some third level medication, you're not only going to get an exclusion rider for psoriasis or psoriatic arthritis, you're likely going to get a payout for 5 years rather than to the age of 65 or
Mm.
longer. And you're going to get a rating, which is an additional premium charge. A lot of residents, have sleep issues. Now, it could be sleep apnea or another sleep disorder. You do see this a lot, ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. But I want to kind of leave it with this. A GSI plan is not only for people that have medical issues. A GSI plan is a great way to shortcut the system because medical underwriting can be anywhere from a couple of weeks
Takes forever.
to a couple of months.
Yeah.
And at the end of it all, after all the medical records are gathered, the prescription drug check is done, you could end up being declined.
Yeah.
And if you're not declined, you might get a policy that does not look anything the way you wanted it. So
Mhm.
I will say, unless you know what is in your medical records, what billing codes are being used in your medical records as far as a diagnosis, if you're completely sure that you have not had a prescription written to you for something by a resident or a fellow that you're colleagues with, and you know for sure you haven't written a script for yourself for something other than something that's completely innocuous, the GSI should really be what you purchase, right?
Mhm.
Conversely, you could say, well, why wouldn't I buy the GSI? Well, maybe the company at your hospital, that specific medical specialty really is not very competitive with that company. But I certainly would want to know whether that GSI plan is available, and I would like to be able to make that decision myself rather than having the decision being made for me.
Yes, definitely GSI is like probably the first tier of protection to consider. And most people, probably almost all physicians, eventually go through a phase where they're working at a place that qualifies them for it.
Yeah,
Typically
and
residency and fellowship for sure, but
yeah,
maybe even
and
more.
I'll
But
kind of like even look at this like one of the great GSI myths, and some well-known blogs talk about this, or some podcasts I've listened to. They say, "But Larry, a GSI plan is more expensive." It is not. If the policy is structured the same way,
same price.
with the same riders, it's going to be exactly the same cost. In some cases, like Daniel mentioned, I might have access to a GSI plan that has a gender neutral or a unisex rate. That's even less expensive than a fully
Yeah.
underwritten plan. So it kind of goes back to do your due diligence. The first thing to do is to be aware or investigate, is a GSI plan available at my institution? And the agents that frequent the medical marketplace, we typically know.
hmm Okay, cool. Well, as we start to wrap up, I think it would be good to maybe share how people can reach you because we're gonna make you the person that can verify all these GSI related questions if you're okay with it. But what's the best way for people to ask questions about this kind of thing or reach out to you for help with this?
Yeah, so email is great. It's L Keller, L-K-E-L-L-E-R, at physicianfinancialservices.com, all spelled out. You can certainly call me or my office, 516-677-6211. I've been in this a long time. I'm happy to have you guys use me as a resource. If you'd like me to review an existing policy that you have, if you'd like me to let you know, like, does a GSI plan exist in my institution? Like, does it make sense for me? Is there anything that I'm missing? I review these policies all the time, and what takes me 5 minutes could literally save you hours of work. So use me as a resource. Don't be shy. We're here for educational purposes. We're here to help you make the decisions that are best for yourself and your families. And a little bit of education, which is really all that a podcast is, will go a tremendous way.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all that, and we'll have to do this more often.
I appreciate it. Always great to be here. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we will chat again.
No guests or clients appearing on the podcast received any form of compensation for their appearance and obtained no other benefit from us. It should not be assumed that every client has had the same experience. This podcast is intended for general public use and is for informational purposes only. The Finance for Physicians podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Physician Financial Services, and opinions stated are their own. Please note that the individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should only be relied upon when coordinated with professional advice. Lawrence B. Keller is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, parentheses PAS, OSJ colon 355 Lexington Avenue, ninth floor, New York, New York 10017, 212-541-8800. Securities products and advisory services are offered through PAS, member FINRA, SIPC, financial representative, the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, parentheses Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. AR insurance license number 1057229. California insurance license number 0C37340. Physician Financial Services is not affiliated or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. 7545285.1, number EXP period 1/27.